Coming in.
Thank you.
Should there be a second referendum on our membership of the EU? Until now, that's an idea largely only supported by keen Remainers such as Tony Blair. And so yesterday, many people were surprised to hear former UKIP leader Nigel Farage say this.
The Cleggs, the Blairs, the Adonises will never, ever, ever give up. They will go on whinging and whining and moaning all the way through this process. So maybe, just maybe, I'm reaching the point of thinking that we should have a second referendum
on what?
On EU membership.
The whole thing?
Yes, of course. Unless you want to have a multiple choice referendum.
No.
Which would confuse people. I think if we had a second referendum on EU membership, we'd kill it off for a generation.
So that's what Mr Farage had to say yesterday, but he went on to write an article for The Telegraph in which he said, to be clear, I do not want a second referendum. I'm not sure that was clear at all. But I fear one may be forced upon the country by Parliament. The best defence of our dramatic referendum victory, he went on, is to be alive to the possibility of having to do it all over again. So what are we to make of that? Well, I'm joined now by the current leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Have you spoken to Nigel since he made his remarks?
I have indeed, yeah.
You have?
Yes.
And what's he said to you?
Well, we had a discussion about this whole thing, and indeed, Nigel's point was that whilst the party does remain opposed to a second referendum for a range of reasons, we may well be confronted with it in the future.
Right.
And there is a need to mobilise the entire Leave campaign, or all the different elements, to unite and actually ensure that we do move this whole Brexit thing forward, because otherwise it's not going to be delivered in any meaningful form. So that's really what he was talking about.
Right. What did you think when you heard him say the comments, I'm reaching the point of thinking that we should have a second referendum on EU membership?
Yeah, and to an extent, I mean, what he's saying there is, OK,
yeah, but what was your reaction when
let's
you
go
heard
into war on this. That was my reaction. I mean, I know Nigel. I know what was behind what he was saying. So how it's come across, agreed, was that he was supportive, potentially, of a second referendum. That's not actually what he was saying.
Well, it is what he was saying. I'm reaching the point of thinking that we should have a second referendum on EU membership.
Right, yeah, but in order to go to war on this, because you know what, this needs to be sorted out, because the government is not delivering on Brexit.
Right. Well, Patrick O'Flynn, a colleague, says he's as wrong on this as Tony Blair. Is he wrong or is he right?
Let's put the question like this.
Well, no, I put the question like that.
If Nigel believed, if Nigel believed that we should have a second referendum, and that's how it did come across, I agree. But if he actually believed that, I would say he was wrong. But the point he's making here is we do not want a second referendum, absolutely clearly.
Right. Is that UKIP's policy? You don't want to...
We do not want a second referendum.
So did he misspeak?
But the point, to an extent, yes. And the point is that he was illustrating the point that this would give, if we did have one, if the government forces one on us, then it would give us the opportunity to decisively put the whole thing to bed and say, you know what, you've got to deliver a proper exiting of the European Union. It's not happening.
That isn't what he meant, is it? You've had a discussion since and decided that's the line you've got to put out, because he has said something deeply unhelpful. Because what evidence is there from the government that they're even considering a second referendum?
Oh, we know it's been discussed.
Oh, do you? How do you know?
It's been, you've been talking about second referendum, and should we have
where's the government said it might have a second referendum?
There is a debate, as you well know, Joe, that is about should we have another referendum, should we have a vote on whether on a future agreement, or should we not?
Can I put this to you that actually, earlier, it was never really being discussed as a viable option, apart from the Liberal Democrats, who actually weren't sure about a second referendum and now are, until Nigel Farage popped up and said, I think we should have a second referendum. I don't remember any government minister saying...
I'll grant you that one, Joe. Yeah, this has raised the whole profile of it. But the meaning here is this is a call to arms for the Leave camp. If indeed the Conservative government was delivering a Brexit, was moving towards a point in which we had a meaningful leaving of the European Union and a clear picture as to how we were going to emerge from it, then indeed this would not be necessary. But what he's saying is that the Leave camp as a whole needs to unite, needs to mobilise and needs to make sure that Theresa May and the government deliver Brexit, and they are not doing so at the moment.
But he's normalised it now, hasn't he? He's normalised the issue, and it will now be debated. He's handed the Remainers, like Andrew Adonis and Tony Blair, and others within the Labour Party, parliamentary party, he's handed them a gift. I would say, you know, if we had a second referendum now, I'd agree with Nigel. We'd win it, hands down. Right.
So, you know, we're not worried about that. It is we oppose it because we have had a democratic mandate.
But what I'm saying is he's actually raised the whole prospect of this being debated further. Do you accept that?
Yes, I do.
Did he go against party policy when he said, I think we are reaching the point of having a second referendum?
Not in that sense. If he had said, I want, or our policy is to have a second referendum, then he would have been going against it.
Are you going to take any action against him?
No. No, not at all.
It's not official UKIP policy. Do you think this has confused the issue for UKIP voters and others?
I think it's confused a lot of people, and Henry's doing a valiant job at trying to defend the remarks of his predecessor, which seemed to me all about Nigel Farage needing to be in the glare of publicity. He can't go a few days without, you know, getting a bit of attention. But David Cameron, Nigel Clegg, all sorts of people, you know, before the last Brexit referendum said, this is your one chance to decide your future in Europe. And whatever you decide, as the British people, we will implement the decision. That's what counts. Glad to see Henry nodding. And I think any attempt to revisit that decision now will so upset people's faith in democracy. It's not just the wrong thing to do for Brexit. I think it's dangerous for public faith in our institutions of Parliament.
Should the Labour Party be thinking about making it policy to offer the idea of a second referendum on the deal?
Possibly, yes. I mean, I think this idea of rerunning the referendum itself, it's, as you say, it's a kind of assault on democracy. And I don't know, you know, what is this Brexit referendum, the final showdown, you know, the last battle, you know, how long is it going to go on? But I think there is a case to be made potentially for having a referendum on the deal.
Should Labour be clearer on that?
I mean, my concern on a second referendum is that it sets also in a broader context. It sets a precedent. For, you know, we've had a democratic exercise, we've had a decision out of it, a mandate's effectively been issued as a result. Oh, hang on a minute, some people don't like it, so let's revisit it again.
A little bit like
for democratic decisions at every level of government. And
people will never trust the elites again. It's the elites didn't like the decision and they want to change.
But a little bit like Nigel Farage in the campaign, referendum campaign, said if it was 50, if it's close, the result, but in favour of Remain, it would be unfinished business. So, I mean, he implied then, at the time, that there would be and should be another referendum if it was close, but the other way.
I think we could quote Nigel Farage on most things to find support for most eventualities.
That may be true.
So,
can I ask you, Henry, before we do, your private life has caused headlines recently. Nigel Farage, I asked him about it, said they're good for UKIP publicity. Do you agree?
It's been quite a quiet week this last week, Joe, and so I've had a lot of time to think about that subject.
So tell us what your thoughts are now you've had time to think.
Quite honestly, I would not have wanted in any way the publicity that this has attracted. I would like it to die down. I've obviously got a lot of things to sort out in my private life. I want to get on and do it and focus on the job in hand, which is the sort of stuff that we've just been talking about.
And does it affect your job as leader of UKIP? I mean, the leader of the UKIP group of Walsall Council has called for you to quit.
Yeah, but some people have, but I'm receiving a huge amount of support as well, saying, you know, this is his private life. Let's get on with the agenda that he's implementing in terms of turning the internal workings of the party around so that we've got a firm, solid base from which to project our politics for exactly the sort of mobilisation that we've just been discussing.
All right. Henry Bolton, thank you.